Thank you everyone for joining us for our Retain Employment Seminar series on resources that employers can use today. And I'm so glad that we have Austin Nugent and Morgan Turner with us. I had the opportunity to be able to see this presentation at the Inclusive Workforce Summit last month and was so glad when they both said they were willing to provide this information to us today in the Employment Seminar series. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a few minutes, but if we want to go ahead and move on to the next slide, I will introduce myself. I am Kimberly Wickert. I am the Employment Seminar Series spokesperson at the University of Kentucky Human Development Institute and Retain Kentucky. I'm a mid-career white female with blonde hair and glasses. Today I'm wearing a black and olive colored shirt. And my preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. As far as the information that we are presenting today, as well as its accompanying materials, this is for informational purposes only and does not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the University of Kentucky Human Development Institute or its individual employees. Although we attempt to provide accessible, accurate, as well as current information, no guarantees are made to that effect. And let's go ahead and show you what is coming up for our November Employment Seminar series. And this is return to work trends. So a lot has changed since the onset of the pandemic 3 years ago. And I'm going to share what some of those return to work trends are post-pandemic and what employers are doing to retain workers following an illness or injury. So that's on November 17th from noon to 12:30. And I put this information in the chat. So if you want to go ahead and click on the link to register, you can do so. So we're going to go ahead and talk about our objectives today. And Austin and Morgan are going to review resources that are available. And we said, resources that employers can use today, but it's not just for employers, it's for workers and workforce professionals, healthcare providers, really everybody. And they're also going to share with us how those resources can be used to support an inclusive workforce through strategies for workers to retain and recruit them, and then also review where we can find these resources. So with that, I would just invite you, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to put those in the chat. I will be monitoring that as we go along, and we'll let Austin and Morgan know as we get information in the chat. And I'd like to once again welcome Austin and Morgan and turn it over to them for their introduction.
All right, thank you. Hi, I'm Morgan Turner, and thank you for having us, Kimberly. So a little about myself is I am a education assistant for the Human Development Institute. I'm a Special Olympics athlete and athlete ambassador and health messenger. And I'm also the vice chair of the Employment First Council. And I will let my colleague Austin introduce herself.
Before I introduce myself, Morgan, do you want to say a little bit about your personal experience with disability? Because I know it's very important.
Yes. I was born with abnormal legs, so I wear prosthetics on both legs. Abnormal left hand, so I have 3 fingers on my left hand, and hydrocephalus, which affects how I process things.
Wonderful. And I'm Austin Nugent. I am a 30-year-old woman with long brown hair. I am currently wearing a green sweater, and behind me is my green office with various bright color art. My preferred pronouns are she, her. And I'm a disability program administrator at the University of Kentucky's Human Development Institute. And through that role, I get the privilege of working alongside Kimberly on the Retain Kentucky project, as well as with Morgan and various other projects. In addition, I am on the board of directors for the National Disability Rights Network, and I also serve at a state level on Kentucky Protection and Advocacy's Mental Health Advisory Council, as well as the board of directors for the Center for Accessible Living, which is one of Kentucky's state centers for independent living. And in addition, I'm an individual that has chronic migraines as well as obsessive compulsive disorder. So two things that, depending on the day, may need various supports in my work setting. So I'm really excited today to be able to share some of the great resources that exist out there to help employers and workforce support inclusive workforce settings.
Thank you both for sharing your expertise today.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Austin, for joining us today. We're really excited to be here. Let's get started. Austin, it seems like the sponsors from the recent Inclusive Workforce Summit are great resources. Can you tell us a little about them?
Yes, of course. So like Kimberly mentioned, Morgan and I shared these resources at the recent Inclusive Workforce Summit. At the end of our presentation today, we will share a link in the chat that will direct folks to a Google Drive that has a document with all of the resources that we share, as well as various PDF of additional resources that we won't get a chance to talk about today. So be sure to check those out, save them, bookmark them to your computer, as they are resources we want to make sure folks have access to and are using. So the first resource I want to highlight is the Kentucky Career Center, which is where the State Office of Vocational Rehabilitation is, or informally known as OVR. And the entire mission of OVR is centered around connecting Kentuckians with disabilities to employment. And they do this by matching companies that need employees with workers who need jobs. So it's a really great resource. In addition, Retain Kentucky, which you're all may be familiar with by, is the Retaining Employment and Talent After Injury and Illness Network. And that project is really focused on helping injured or ill workers throughout Kentucky remain in or return to work. And our Kimberly and myself and all the staff on Retain, we support this in various ways, but one of the key things that our team, our staff does is work with employees, employers, and healthcare providers to address issues that can impact successful return to work. And we have various resources on employer and worker services, including reasonable accommodations, accessible technology, inclusive communication, and trauma-informed approaches. And then you're all attending today our monthly employer seminar series, which is just a really great way to get information. And then one of the last sponsors of the recent Inclusive Workforce Summit, there is one additional one that we'll talk about at the end, but is the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber does a lot, but today I specifically want to highlight the Kentucky Chamber Foundation Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And the center is really focused on partnering with employers throughout Kentucky to help build an inclusive and equitable Commonwealth. And so through these partnerships with employers of all sizes and wanting feedback and support and guidance from not only civic leaders, but education and nonprofit leaders, and really thinking about diversity within just the type of workforce jobs that exist. So in doing so and partnering, the center is really focused on creating deliberate, meaningful, and sustainable change to address the inequalities that have long hindered Kentucky's progress. And they actually encourage folks to join the network and help to be a part of transforming workplaces across our state and to help make our state a better place to live, work, and do business.
Yes, all of these sponsors support Employment First. Kentucky's Employment First policy was signed into law on March 24th, 2022. It states, it is the policy of the Commonwealth of Kentucky that competitive integrated employment shall be considered the first and primary option for persons with disability of working age who desired to become employed. As I mentioned earlier, I am a person with a disability who is employed full time and serve as the vice chair of the Employment First Council. Employment First is important to everyone as it aims to increase the number of people with disabilities who are employed in Kentucky. Austin, are there any resources that can support employers to implement Employment First?
Absolutely. And yes, I just want to highlight again, Employment First in itself is a policy, but as Morgan mentioned, our state also has a statewide council that is really working on supporting the Commonwealth to implement and ensure Employment First is the primary option for folks who want to work, who have disabilities. So one of the resources I do want to highlight that will help employers to implement Employment First is the Association of People Supporting Employment First. It's also known as APSE, and they are the only national organization focused exclusively on Employment First and advancing employment equity for people with disabilities. And on APSE's website, they have numerous learning opportunities and available resources for businesses as well as providers on how to recruit, hire, and retain individuals with disabilities. And then in addition, Kentucky actually has a very active chapter, which also offers professional development, has various opportunities for employment service providers. And then again, they also have a lot of resources available for employers. And there's an overlap between the folks who are part of the Employment First Council as well as Kentucky APSE chapter. And then in addition, a new resource I want to highlight that just came out of the Kentucky Commission on the Deaf of Hard of Hearing is they recently developed a hiring deaf and hard of hearing employees guide. And within this guide, they have a lot of background information as well as highlighting various things like Employment First. But then they have a lot of information on how to provide reasonable accommodations for employees who are deaf or hard of hearing. And this is, like I said, it's a new resource, but it's available on their website. And I really encourage folks to check it out and use it.
Hey, Austin, I just want to mention on the previous slide, I saw that the return on investment was for every dollar an employer spends on accommodation. I think it was $28.69 was the average return for the return on investment, which is huge. And I think, that speaks to employers. And then the reduced employee turnover with, the emphasis on retention right now. And we've talked a lot about that throughout our employment seminar series this past year. And so thank you for sharing those stats, because I think that really speaks to employers and their recruitment and retention efforts.
Of course, yeah. And so a lot of what we're sharing today are just these broad resources, and the resources will not only provide strategies on how to support workers with disabilities, but also, like Kimberly highlighted on this one slide, just some of the important background information that really highlights that hiring people with disabilities is like a great choice and really why we should be striving to support an inclusive workforce in Kentucky and throughout the United States and the world. So moving on, Morgan.
Yeah. These all sound amazing. Austin, isn't there also a great resource for employers about supporting competitive integrated employment for autistic workers?
Yes, so Innovative Supports for Autistic Workers, or ISAW. There's lots of acronyms. And the mission of ISAW is to support employers in their understanding of issues specifically relevant to autism and employment. And they offer a lot of in-person trainings as well as hosting online modules and offering ongoing support to increase employment for workers on the autism spectrum. And one of the things I love is they even have information on service animals, which is really great. So this is another great resource. It is part of the Human Development Institute, which Morgan will, I believe, talk about now.
Yes, in addition, Kentucky's University Center on Disability, the Human Development Institute, or HDI, is committed to helping Kentucky fulfill the promise of employment first. This is where Austin and I work. HDI has numerous projects and initiatives and partnerships that aim to decrease employment. Employment disparities that exist between people with and without disabilities. We also have an online Kentucky Disability Resource Guide with a searchable database of available resources to help improve the lives of Kentuckians with disabilities across the lifespan.
Yes, so this is HDI is obviously part of Retain, but it also has various other projects that are really focused on advancing employment for folks with disabilities. And they also have something that Morgan often forgets to mention, but is HDI's employment files. And these are videos that feature people with disabilities sharing about their real life employment experiences. And so it's just a really great way to hear from the folks that are with disabilities that are getting that have the opportunity to work and just learn about not only the great benefits for the employee, but also for includes the perspective and voices of coworkers as well as the managers or whatnot, sharing how their work settings have improved because and benefited from the hiring of people with disabilities.
Yes, I'm a little bit biased, but these videos are really great. I really enjoy sharing my employment journey with others to be successful in my employment. I utilize job accommodations to help manage my task list, organize my emails, and prepare for presentations and meetings. Austin, for employers wanting to learn more about job accommodations, do you have any recommended resource?
Of course. So there's the Job Accommodation Network, which is a really great national resource, but they offer free expert and confidential guidance on workplace accommodations and disability employment issues. And the JAN, or the Job Accommodation Network consultants and employment specialists, will also assist not only employers, but individuals with disabilities to successfully identify and implement job accommodation solutions. And so where job accommodations is often, a thing that comes up when folks think about hiring people with disabilities, this is a really great resource to think through and identify, that job accommodations could be something like, that doesn't have to be super complicated and costly to implement. So again, another really great resource. But I also want to highlight that assistive technology, or AT, can also be a really great tool for supporting employers with disabilities. And for folks who may not be familiar, AT is really any item or piece of equipment that can be super low tech or super high tech, used to improve and maintain independence. So when thinking about this for employers, the Kentucky Assistive Technology Service Network, or CATS, is a great resource. And CATS has 5 regional centers across the state that not only offer assistive technology demos, but they provide training and technical assistance. And something that I find super useful is they actually have a lending library where folks can find and borrow free or low cost assistive technology. And then in addition, CATS also has a funding guide that provides a lot of helpful information on the financial assistance options for helping people to purchase assistive technology.
Yes, CATS is also amazing. Assistive technology really helps me be successful at my job as well. Austin, in addition to all of these great state resources, are there any national or regional resources that would be beneficial for employers to know about, especially if they want to find information about the Americans with Disabilities Act?
Yes, so obviously the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, is our civil rights law, and it's a really important federal law. So really wanting to make sure employers have accurate, up-to-date information on that policy, as well as just other information. And so one of these resources I want to direct folks to is the Southeast ADA Center, which is a great regional organization that provides information, training, materials, and technical assistance, not only on the Americans with Disabilities Act, but also on technology access. And in addition to the center's Kentucky State Resource Network, in addition to the Southeast ADA Center, there's a Kentucky network, and that's called the Kentucky State Resource Network. And online, they have a lot of resources and publications available, again, about the ADA, as well as inclusion and disability rights. And then another resource is the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, or ODEP, another acronym. And ODEP is really focused on driving systems and practice changes by disseminating policy strategies and effective practices, and really, thinking of the importance of sharing information, as well as providing technical assistance, not only to government agencies, but service providers and non-governmental entities, including public and private employers. And so ODEP has numerous resources for employers, including really great information on tax incentives when thinking about hiring people with disabilities.
Thanks, Austin. Those sound like great resources. Before we wrap up today, I have a couple more questions for you. I know I've been hitting you with a lot of questions and resources. Are there any other national resources employers should know about?
Yes, so there's EARN, which is the Employer Assistance and Resource Network on Disability Inclusion. And they offer information and resources to help employers recruit, hire, retain, and advance people with disabilities, build inclusive workplace cultures, and help meet workforce and businesses meet diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility goals. And then in addition, there is Disability In, which is a really great leading nonprofit resource that really focuses on business disability inclusion worldwide. And so they have a really great resource on their website, their Disability Equity Index. I think it might actually be Disability Equality Index. I think that's a typo, but they have a really great resource that will help businesses think through achieving disability inclusion and equality in their own workplaces.
I just want to chime in here, and two thoughts I had when you shared this previously was on the earn slide, the part about advancing employment for people with disabilities. And that's really important to us at Retain. We have a work experience survey that our return to work coordinators do with people who have a stay at work goal. And we look at how they want to advance in their roles and in their job and in the workplace. And I think that's sometimes something that we don't focus on or maybe even neglect. And so I was really glad to see that as part of what EARN helps support as a resource as well. And then as far as the Disability Equality Index, for those of us who were at the Inclusive Workforce Summit, we had the opportunity to hear Russell Schaefer as one of the keynote speakers and really talked about what they can offer to employers who can then, help promote the employment and inclusion of people with disabilities. So I really encourage you to check that out as well. And thank you, Austin and Morgan, for sharing that. And just going back a little bit, Morgan, also about how you kind of listed out your job accommodation. And I really appreciate that too, because at Retain, that's what our return to work coordinators help support our participants in identifying and then communicating and requesting what their needs are with their employers in our win-win approach to reasonable accommodation. So that was really perfect to hear you say that, because it does start with people being able to identify what their needs are in relation to that job accommodation. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you, Kimberly, for your feedback. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you, Austin. And because there may be a few people that work in HR joining us today, any resources for them?
Sorry, I was muted. So folks in HR may already be familiar with this resource, but I just would like to highlight, and that's the Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM. And I believe they have a conference coming up because I got an email recently. But just in case folks aren't familiar, SHRM is the world's largest HR professional society devoted to human resource management. And their website has a lot of comprehensive information on dozens of topics, including the Americans with Disabilities Act, mental health, pay equity, and even overcoming workplace bias.
Thank you, Austin, for all the great information. And as a reminder, all the resources discussed today and more are available by visiting the link in the chat, bit.ly/inclusive workforce resources, or scanning the QR code on the slide. If anyone has any questions, you can contact the Human Development Institute or myself at morgan.turner@uky.edu. Another thank you to Austin, who can be reached at anugent@uky.edu. I hope you all find these resources useful and start using them today.
And we'll turn it back over to Kimberly. Thank you again for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Goodness. Thank you both so much for sharing. Those are phenomenal resources and resources that we use at Retain Kentucky on a regular basis. And so I will send the slide deck out to those of you who have joined us today. But just a really quick reminder, because I know we're up against our time, but if anybody is interested and has knows someone that may be eligible for Retain Kentucky, our eligibility criteria are listed here on this slide. And then we also have on the next slide ways that we can be reached, which is by phone, email, visiting our website, or also the participant screener QR code. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude. And again, thank you so much, Morgan and Austin, for spending time with us today and sharing these excellent resources. I I always have a little bit more I learn when I hear you share these. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully everyone finds some of the information we shared today helpful to take back into their own work settings.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.